Lucky Lefty Podcast. Honora Boy back in the building. Sean Davis left, a little busy. He's out in Arizona. I know he's going to be covering Ben Morrison's camp that he has out there for a couple of days, doing some other things. Brought to you by Onora Whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com, that premium American whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com. And if you drink, by all means, make sure that you do so responsibly. Yo, I cannot go on without first congratulating Coach Corrigan and Notre Dame men's lacrosse for once again scaling the mountain and planting the gold helmet and the Notre Dame flag atop the mountain that is NCAA men's lacrosse. Back-to-back champions, one-loss champions. It's been a while since that's been done, right? I think Virginia and Loyola were the last schools to do that. And then before them, there was only one other school that went undefeated, which is crazy, right? Because lacrosse is only a 15, 16 game season, something like that. It's amazing the difficulty and the success. Their only loss was to a Georgetown team earlier this season. I believe it was a 2-point loss during the regular season, and then they avenged that loss in the quarterfinals on the way to the national championship. So just an incredible performance. 10 goal domination over Maryland. Maryland scores the first 2 goals, ladies and gentlemen, and you're thinking to yourself, maybe you weren't thinking, but I'm thinking to myself, okay, this might be a tight one. They hit the switch, man, and it made me think. LL question of the day: will Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame have a switch? Like, we talk about the new toys, the new coaches. Will Notre Dame and Coach Freeman have a switch to hit during the season, especially when tough times start? Like, they go to Texas A&M. If Texas A&M jumps out to a 10-zip lead, how does this team respond? How does this coaching staff respond? All year or last year, we worried about this team going on the road and being able to deal with adversity and how they would respond to adversity. And the majority of the time, I think it's safe to say that they didn't like the way they responded. And it's safe to say that we as fans didn't like the way they responded to adversity on the road. Well, they get to answer that right off the bat. Game 1, College Station, Coach Elko and the Aggies. At some point during that game, ladies and gentlemen, I fully suspect or fully expect Notre Dame to come face to face with adversity. What switch are they going to have? Will they have a switch to hit like men's lacrosse? We have something special for you today. Something special for you today. Patrick Stevens will be on with us in about 10 minutes. In about 10 minutes, Patrick Stevens will be on with us. He is a writer for USA Lacrosse. And we want to talk to him about what makes this run the last 2 years so special, because Coach Corrigan is a historically fantastic men's lacrosse coach. Fantastic. Legend. Just was never able to get over the hump. And shout out to his wife for having that magical hat that he needs to hold on to. Never get another hat ever again, Coach. Don't change your hat. Matter of fact, does Marcus Freeman need a hat? Is that what he needs to get over the hump, Irish fans? Does he need one of those hats? One of those dingy, dirty hats, right? One of those non-crispy hats that's had beer, Gatorade, water just doused on it, but it has so much magic in it. Because his fade is always tight, right? Coach Freeman always has the fade tight. Shout out to Julio Cuts for keeping Coach Freeman looking fresh on the sidelines. But maybe Coach Freeman needs to don a Notre Dame hat on the sidelines. Maybe that's what he needs to bring some magic on the road. Maybe that's what he needs to change the fortunes of Notre Dame in 2024, to create that switch for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So Patrick Stevens is going to join us. He's going to give us about 10 minutes. I just want to dig into what has made this team special, right? And you talk about, see, I'm not a lacrosse fan, right? So you talk about them not creating a new trend, but I guess they did create a new trend in their depth, talking about their midfield depth and how they run three lines at the midfield, and no one else in college lacrosse is doing that. But, just listen to that. It harkens back to the way lacrosse used to be. So that right there is something that I really want to talk about, because Notre Dame is going to have to do something. And it might not be something so evolutionary that no one has ever done it. It really might be bringing something from the past to the present and modern day that a lot of people aren't ready for and can't combat. But I believe programs like the Maryland, Virginia, all of those Eastern Atlantic Coast schools have always been lacrosse monsters, right? And even the broadcaster said it yesterday. Shout out to Maryland. And I believe they took out number 2 Duke. They took out Virginia. They lost 8 out of 10 or something ridiculous during the season. 8 of their last 10. It was so for them to make the run that they made to even match up with Notre Dame in the championship game. You have to tip your cap to the run they made, the resiliency they showed as a team, the toughness they showed as a team. That was absolutely fantastic, man. Absolutely fantastic. And it had me thinking about, there's so many different paths to a championship. Of course, in college football, you're not winning. I mean, you're not going to lose 3 of your last 5 and make it to the playoffs, right? We won't see a run like that. Maybe you lose 2 of your last 3. Maybe we will see someone lose 2 of their last 3 games after going undefeated, get into the back end of the playoffs, and then make a run. Maybe it happens. But only in lacrosse can a team like Maryland do what they did. Score the first 2 goals, look like they have a chance to really truly compete in the championship game and pull off the major upset. But they just couldn't get it done. They just couldn't get it done. So that's the LL question of the day, ladies and gentlemen. What is going to be that switch? Or do you feel like Notre Dame is going to have a switch? Will it be the offense? Will the new offense be that switch that allows Notre Dame to kind of like go ahead and face adversity and take off in games? I don't know. Is it going to be the defense that's once again the foundation of the success of the Notre Dame squad under Marcus Freeman? Is that going to be that switch that Notre Dame is able to hit moving forward? We're going to talk about it. Once again, Patrick Stevens coming up, usalacrosse.com. He's a writer for them. He's going to jump in with us, and we're going to dig into this, man. We're going to try and correlate it to football. This correlation as well. Notre Dame is recruiting. They already got Dylan Faison to commit in the 25 and the 26 class. But now they're recruiting another talented 3-star, 3-sport athlete that plays lacrosse as well. He might be coming in for the Irish invasion. There is something being identified in lacrosse and through lacrosse by the Notre Dame staff that they are falling in love with. So once again, coming up in a few minutes, Patrick Stevens from USA Lacrosse Magazine. He also does Post Sports and Blue Ribbon Sports. Talks several different sports, but he writes specifically for USA Lacrosse Magazine as well. He's coming up in a few minutes. Just waiting for him to jump on with us. So how you guys feeling, man? Did you enjoy your holiday weekend? I hope you guys didn't eat too much. Anytime you have that Monday holiday, getting back to work and getting back in the swing of things is absolutely sometimes a bore. And we're glad right here. I hope Left can join us. Like I said, in between, I'm excited about it. I'm sure he's setting up an exclusive interview with Benjamin Morrison. Benjamin Morrison's camp is going to be out in Arizona, I believe, on the 1st. I believe it starts this weekend, Friday and Saturday. His camp is going to be out there in Arizona. And Left is going to be out there. And then also, I'm going to be down at Junior Day, the Irish Invasion, coming this Sunday. I'll be down there looking forward to it. Mark Zachary commits to Notre Dame this past Saturday. We can now say it. Look, and you can check out myself and Ryan Roberts for the recruiting hour coming up at 1 o'clock Eastern time over at Irish Breakdown. But the Mark Zachary thing, the only team that I really feel like had a chance was Michigan. Even when people felt really good about Damian Shanklin, Mark Zachary was the one that I felt like was locked in. And once again, and I can say this, I've been saying this, and I think some of my cohorts have been a little slower to say it because they wanted things to play out. But I was on record, and I flat out said, like, I think this class has the potential to be one of the best classes. Does it have some holes or a very not holes? It has one glaring hole, and we know what that is. It's a defensive line in the 25 class. It's a defensive line. It is what it is. They don't have to sit up here and debate about it. It is what it is. They have time to see if they can improve upon what they did and what they've done to this point. That bears watching, right? And then finishing the deal at the wide receiver position. Those are the two questions that remain. But let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, man, whatever Mike Mickens is being paid, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not. Whatever he's being paid, ladies and gentlemen, is not enough. And we need to make sure that we appreciate the job that he's doing. And we know there is one last bit of business when it comes to secondary recruiting in 2025. And that young man's name is Jadon Blair. And we'll get to him on the other side. But we have a special guest right here on the Lucky Lefty podcast, SHAUN Davis, MALIK ZAIRE. He'll be joining us shortly, hopefully, as he's out in Arizona and taking care of some business. But we are pleased to have a very special guest join us today on the heels of Notre Dame men's lacrosse going back to back as they win another national championship. His name is Patrick Stevens, and he comes to us from USA Lacrosse Magazine. And we want to welcome him in to the Lucky Lefty podcast. Mr. Stevens, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing well. How are you?
Hey, I am fantastic. Thank you for giving us some of your time today. We greatly appreciate it. So let's just start off. Men's lacrosse at Notre Dame has long been viewed as, I guess, a program that just never really get over the hump. Very competitive, legendary coach, but somehow, some way in the last 2 years, especially starting the second half of last season, they've become one of the most dominant and premier programs in the country. What do you think has been the main reason? Because the Kavanaugh brothers, a lot of people would like to use as the bookmark. But what do you think is the formula that has allowed Notre Dame to ascend to the top of the mountain twice?
Well, I'll start with some of the formula that's always been there over 20, 25, 30 years. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame, you go back, always has a good goalie. Always has a good goalie. So Liam Entenmann, the latest in a long line and a really good one. But you can go back and look at a lot of other dudes, like Scotty Rogers was the most outstanding player in the 2010 tournament, and they didn't even win the tournament that year. That's how good he was. So you have that. They've always had really good system defenses, guys that play well together. There's been a fair number of really great defenders, but they've always been cohesive. You mentioned the Kavanaughs. There's been obviously a line of them. But I really believe that one of the things that really sparked the last couple years, and in particular last year, was when they had a team in 22 that went 8-4. They won their last 6 games. They were playing great. They were probably the second best team in the country, behind the Maryland team that ran the table. And they got left out of the tournament.
Right.
And that team last year was breathing fire game in and game out. Didn't win every game, but that was a team that was really, really, really fired up. And so I think this year's team probably didn't quite have that level because it's impossible to, right? Like,
right.
You won a title, you're not going to be as angry, quite frankly. You can't summon that all the time. But they had so much depth this year. Usually you have teams in lacrosse that they might have a really good first midfield and maybe they'll run a second midfield and they can get something from it.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's out there running 3 midfields and not just running them, but they got 3 goals from their second midfielders yesterday, plus an assist on another goal. They got 2 goals from their third midfield. There's teams that are fortunate to go a full season and pick up 3 or 4 goals from their third midfield. And Notre Dame's out there doing it in a national title game. So I think that the depth this year combined with just sort of that, incentive last year. I thought the way I've described last year for Notre Dame is a rare intersection of ability and incentive. And this year's team, I don't know that even if the results were more impressive in some ways, I don't know that this Notre Dame team was as good as last year's, but they were that much better than everybody else in the country. So I think that's the thing that kind of stands out too, is that they were so consistent. So consistency, depth, and incentive, I think are all 3 big things that went into this run the last couple of years.
You remind me so much. It takes me back to even my high school years when I played basketball here in Chicago, and our legendary coach, he started the program, and I was part of the beginning because we were in a system where relegation existed, right?
Ooh.
And so the program had been in relegation, and we finally, my class finally got it to the top conference.
Mm-hmm.
And then 10 years later, even when they won the first city championship, so do you feel like that is something that's felt throughout this entire program by former players, that what they're seeing from this program even now is felt even back to that team, like you said, that was left out of the tournament, and even teams before them that kind of built that program up to this point? Do you feel like
I don't
that
think
still permeates?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And you think about how, and you've seen this in a lot of programs, not just Notre Dame, where the institutional investment was not immediate.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you didn't have a full scholarship allotment, or maybe, you didn't have the nice facility, or maybe you didn't have that stuff. But they sort of methodically built this thing up. By the time they got to their first Final Four in 2001, they were an NCAA tournament regular. They just couldn't quite punch through. And then there were a couple tough years, and then they started becoming a tournament regular again. And then they started becoming a team that you saw in the Final Four more often than not. And so there's been there's been sort of a gradual, decades-long buildup to this for Notre Dame. I think the ACC affiliation probably helped out a little bit. You go back, 15 years or so ago, 2009, that was a team that went undefeated in the regular season. Mm-hmm. Playing in what was called the Great Western Lacrosse League, which no longer exists. And it was Notre Dame and Ohio State and a bunch of Denver was in there and a bunch of other schools. Denver before it got really good. And so I think that the consistency of the spotlight of the ACC's probably helped out a lot too. But I also think you got to give a lot of credit to the entire coaching staff, not just the head coach, but Chris Wojcik, the offensive coordinator, or one of the offensive coaches, and you look at Ryan Wellner, the defensive coordinator. Those are guys that did a lot here over the last few years to really elevate and help. Not necessarily elevate, but to allow this team to thrive the way that it did.
So some of our listeners are really locked in to Notre Dame lacrosse and lacrosse at large. But for a novice like myself that's really just locked in the last 3 years or so through Notre Dame, how important, because I was listening to the broadcast in the semifinal game, and they were talking about the depth at midfield that is so uncommon for today's lacrosse, and it gives Notre Dame an advantage. But they said it harkened back to the lacrosse of the 80s and the 90s. What do they mean by that, and why did we see that go away And why is Notre Dame? Why do you feel like they're bringing it back? And do you think it will become a trend for the rest of men's lacrosse?
Well, that's a lot to unpack with that question. So it's a really good question. When they talk about going back to the 80s and 90s, there was less specialization in the sport, like defensive midfielders. Like you think about guys like Ben Ramsey for Notre Dame that play almost entirely on defense with a short stick. Like you used to have all the time guys that ran both ways. Like they'd go play offense, they'd run back, play defense all the time. And now, people worry about, well, is this guy getting hung up on defense? An offensive midfielder that's stuck back there. And so that's some of it. I think the depth issue is a matter of I kind of make the analogy to baseball where you have pitchers that don't pitch as long in games because they're throwing 100 miles an hour. Like people want to have fresh guys out there. I do think that when you look at Monday playing the second time in 3 days, man, that was such an advantage yesterday, right? Like, those dudes were so fresh out there. And Maryland's defensive players had played a full game on Saturday. And you're looking at a first midfield line for Notre Dame that probably played, I don't know, maybe 60% of the time, and a second midfield that was probably out there about 30% of the time. I don't know if we see this shift entirely that way, but it's a reminder that there's more than one way to win. And there's different assets that you can have. And Notre Dame, I think, is a team that, I'm trying to think back to how many teams I would say enjoyed that much depth. I think back to the team that played in the final 20 years ago at Navy, that they played 3 midfields, but they also had like an unlimited roster. And so they were taking advantage of their big asset. I think for Notre Dame, they did the exact same thing, but it's hard to develop that kind of depth. And the other thing to remember too, is we're talking about a COVID era where you have bigger rosters and you have guys that are playing in the 5th year. I don't know if it's going to be possible to stretch that out quite as well as Notre Dame did this year on a regular basis. You can certainly aim for it. I think it's a great goal. And the other thing that it does is, rather than, leaning on your top 18, 19, 20 guys on your roster, suddenly you're getting guy 25 and 26 involved. And what does that do to just keep everybody engaged and excited, and everybody has an opportunity to go out there and do something, and maybe even do something really helpful to get a win. And so there's a lot of value in the camaraderie and the excitement that's built up that way, as you well know. Like, I mean, I'm sure from your playing days, like if you could get that third running back in there, or you could get that extra receiver, to catch a couple passes, right? Like that's fantastic, right?
Yeah, you're right. Once again, Patrick Stevens, USA Lacrosse Magazine, right with us for a couple of more minutes. You talk about the growth of the game, and I think it's growing at a fantastic rate right now, especially in the United States. Here in Chicago, where I'm based, the public school system has teams popping up all over the city. And I would have never known when I was in high school that any inner city schools in Chicago would ever play lacrosse, or kids from the inner city would play lacrosse. But seeing it and actually having a young godson of mine that actually plays for Kenwood High School here in Chicago, a program that they just began 3 years ago, and watching them grow and really get mollywopped by teams that have been around for 10, 15 years. But that's what it is. And I think in 10 years, they probably will be able to truly compete. But what do you attribute that type of growth and hearing that, inner city schools in big cities are now playing lacrosse and kids have that opportunity? We know club play is always dominant. How is that going to impact recruiting down the road when you see inner cities and the public school systems now getting involved with lacrosse?
Well, I think first of all, you kind of touched on one of the big things, with the sport. Like there's a sort of, financial barrier to entry, right, with the club teams and whatnot. And so to see that growing in more urban areas and in different areas in general, like you look at Zappatello, the defenseman for Maryland, who was the USILA Player of the Year. He's from Oregon. So I mean, you've got stuff from all over the place. It used to be like, right, Central New York, Long Island, Baltimore, DC, and that was it. I think one of the things that helps the sport so much is when you strip all the, the club stuff and all the other things away, like it's a fun game, right? Like you're running around, you're on the move, and you bring in principles from other sports. Like if you're playing lacrosse and you're going behind the net, that's a lot like hockey. Your off-ball movement and setting screens, it's like basketball. And then you've got some physicality to it. Maybe not as much physicality as football, but you can still smack somebody with a stick a little bit if you're clever about it. And so I think all of those things really benefit the sport in terms of trying to grow it and make it more appealing. You look at games like the D3 final the other day, it was 9-8 early in the second quarter. That's the sort of thing that you're looking around and everybody's running up and down the field. And people are going to get excited about that. And so if you're a kid and you can be in a game where, like you and 80 of your teammates might be able to score a goal, like realistically, like you could get yourself into a 14-13 game. You have all these people contributing, kind of going back to the idea of what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Like there's a lot to like about that. And it's a sport where you're on the move. You're not just standing in one spot for 10 minutes at a time. So, I think it's no surprise that sport has really taken off really over the last 20 to 30 years. And the more areas that it's in, certainly the better for everyone, because the more people that get exposed to it, the more people are going to be able to play it at a level even beyond just like a local level or a high school level or a rec level or something like that.
And along with that, we see Notre Dame in the football program being intertwined with the lacrosse program. Jordan Faison, Tyler Buckner, part of that championship team this year. They just got one of the top lacrosse players and football players from Florida, Jordan Faison's little brother, Dylan Faison, committed to Notre Dame for both sports. And then they're recruiting another kid in the 26th class as a 3-sport star that plays lacrosse as well. Do you see a lot of other college football programs delving into that recruiting base or delving into that talent pool of lacrosse? Because there are similarities that you just pointed out. That could change the game because Jordan Faison was absolutely fantastic in the second half of the football squad.
Absolutely. And we've seen it from time to time over the years. Like, I mean, I'll give you a guy from Notre Dame from the late 2000s, Will Yateman was a guy that played there. I see you appreciating the name being brought up. He later played at Maryland. Another guy that played a quarterback for Navy, Xavier Arline. Was also an attackman. So, I think some of it depends on where the guys are coming from, right? Like, can you play at a reasonably high level in both lacrosse and football, or lacrosse and whatever sport you're talking about at the high school level? So you're trying to evaluate it realistically. So like Xavier Arline's from Long Island. So that makes sense, right? Like other guys, maybe it's, you're bringing them in primarily for one sport, but let's see if they can do something else in the second sport. So I think that there's certainly something to be said for those multi-sport guys. I know some coaches have always been very high on, let's go get guys that play multiple sports, especially when you start thinking about defensive guys with the basketball, lacrosse analog there, the crossover of zone and man and all that stuff. And so I think that on that front, you're certainly going to have coaches that are always going to want guys that are multi-sport athletes that understand a lot of different principles. How much it happens over, being able to play multiple sports, tough to say. And by the way, here's another guy that's played both football and lacrosse and was recruited to play both. Dante Trader for Maryland played lacrosse last season and has been a starting safety for them the last couple of years. So certainly we see it maybe a little bit more than we had in the past. But certainly not something that's impossible to do. And, I think that for you look at Notre Dame and having two of those guys on their title team, hopefully that's an inspiration to be able to have more multi-sport guys moving forward.
So summarize this for Notre Dame fans, because I don't know how you felt when Maryland scored those first 2 goals. I think a lot of Notre Dame fans were like, uh-oh, what's happening? And then I heard other people say, we never had a doubt. Like once Notre Dame hit the switch, we felt this coming. How did you feel? And then summarize for us as Notre Dame fans what the last 3 years and how they sit in the pantheon of NCAA men's lacrosse history.
So I thought when Maryland got up 2-0, it's like, this might be interesting because I thought that game, because a quick aside, these title games have a tendency to not be all that interesting. You got guys that are tired, and you get title games where the final scores, 10-5 and 9-6 and stuff like that. And so I thought this was going to be like a Notre Dame grinded out 10-7 type victory. And so Maryland getting on the board quick, and they've got their face-off guy, Luke Weirman, who had a fabulous game. I'm thinking, well, they're opening a window here. And then, by the time we got to the end of the first quarter, I just sort of grumbled out loud. It's like, we're done here. This is over. That's it. We've seen enough. So I think that I think that on that front, it did not take long for Notre Dame to sort of take any sort of drama of this. The way I described it in my game story was the game started late and ended early. Yeah. And that's basically what happened was they had the rain delay and then of course the game might as well have been over at 3:00 like it was supposed to be. So, where does Notre Dame rate in the pantheon of all-time teams? It's kind of hard to come up with, a comparison, going too far back. But in the last quarter century, there's only 3 teams that have won titles in back-to-back years. And there's the Virginia sort of exception that won in 19 and 21, but there was no COVID tournament. Right. But it's this Notre Dame team, Duke in 13 and 14, and Syracuse in 08 and 09. And that's a pretty good group of teams to be in there with. I'll tell you, too, that Notre Dame is the first team to win every game in the tournament by at least 5 goals and win a title since Syracuse in 1990. And that's basically like the gold standard team with Gary Gait and Paul Gait and all those guys. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty impressive feat this year to go 30-3 over 2 years, especially in a COVID era where you have all these extra fifth-year guys and all this extra talent. I'm actually more impressed with Notre Dame over the 2-year window than I am in just a single-year window.
Yep. Long shot to have 3 championships in a row.
Well, they lose a lot, but a lot of other teams lose a lot too. And so, there's no Pat Cavanaugh, no Liam Entenmann. And I was going through the list before we started this, just kind of looking up the guys that aren't going to be back. And it's hard, right, in the COVID era, trying to figure out, well, who's back and who's not back. But, Conlon, Napolitano, Dobson, that's a lot of dudes to be missing. Yeah. But I certainly would not want to start Notre Dame any lower than second or third for next year because, they still have got Chris Cavanaugh. We talked about all that midfield depth. That just means that some of those guys are going to play a little bit more. They've still got Ben Ramsey. They've still got Will Donovan. I think the kid Light on defense, Shaun Light, he is going to be an absolute monster here for a long time. I mean, I think you're looking at it's a little early to say it, but he might turn out to be the best defenseman ever to play for Notre Dame, and that is some high praise. So, wow. I think that's a really good core group to work with. I think there's going to be a few teams that we're going to see, like a Syracuse that had a young group that took the next logical step this year. And I think they're going to be really hard to deal with next season, but there's a lot of championship residue in South Bend, and I certainly think that the Irish are going to be heard from next season.
Patrick Stevens, USA Lacrosse Magazine. Thank you for joining us right here on the Lucky Lefty podcast. Before you go, let everyone know how they can follow you and keep up with all of your things, especially going into the league, the club season.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Discourse. Replace the I with a 1, so that's D1SCOURSE.
Hey, Patrick Stevens, USA Lacrosse Magazine. Thank you for joining us today. Eternal blessings and favor to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, Patrick Stevens joins us right here on the Lucky Lefty podcast. I had to get him in. I read his article yesterday talking about the game and talking about the historical impact of Notre Dame and what they've done over the last 2 years. And I think Notre Dame fans, we need to understand that this is a really big moment, man, in sports. Really big moment in sports if you're a Notre Dame sports fan. Don't overlook it because it's not one of the big ones. Basketball, men's basketball, football. This is huge, man. What Notre Dame was able to accomplish was historical. And they have a chance to do something that no one has ever done. No one has ever done next year. Like I said, they lose a lot. But because they have so much depth And because they continue to recruit at the level that they recruit, Patrick said it, man. You're looking at a team that's going to be ranked second or third in the nation going into next season with a really good shot at winning 3 in a row. Think about that. 3 championships in a row in men's lacrosse at Notre Dame. That would be absolutely monstrous. Hey, Coach Corrigan, hey, let me tell you, man, Coach Freeman, Coach Ivy, Truth, you got some work to do. You got some work to do. Because there's a giant growing bigger and bigger each and every year. That is Notre Dame men's lacrosse in South Bend. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, does Notre Dame have enough to get over the top and make it to the top? And what the heck was happening in Alabama last week? We'll talk about it. Lucky Lefty Podcast. We spin it different.
What's up, family? The merch shop is finally here. Lucky Lefty Network merch shop. We got it all. From the shirts to the hoodies to the hats to the nitty gritties. Come here right now. Shop with us. Come get the swag because you know, if anything else, we spin it different. You see the gritty. You see how we get down. It's elite.
Lucky Lefty Podcast. We're back at it. Missed you guys so much. Just to give you an update of what's been going on. Shaun Davis is in the building. ONORA Whiskey, ONORAWhiskey.com, that premium American whiskey. Sorry about that. I'm shaking the screen, hitting my computer. ONORAWhiskey.com. And if you drink, by all means, make sure you do so responsibly. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. Then share, let everybody know. Leave your comments. We love your comments. We love the chat each and every day. You keep it lit for each and every show, and we respond to all. Home of the Misguided Passion, committed to making sure that we continue to spin it different. We just had Patrick Stevens from USA Lacrosse Magazine on to talk about the impact of Notre Dame men's lacrosse, back-to-back national champions. Fantastic time to be a Notre Dame sports fan and a Notre Dame's men's lacrosse fan. Shout out locally to Northwestern women's lacrosse, who was also going for back-to-back championships and fell short just a little bit. They led for the majority of the game, and then Boston College just really came back, caught fire, and the Lady Wildcats, they fall short of winning back-to-back championships. I think that would have been the first time that men's and women's would have had back-to-back champions in over 34 years, if I'm not mistaken, if Northwestern had been able to seal the deal. So it was literally a quarter. Northwestern was like, if I'm not mistaken, they were like 16 minutes away from going back to back. So history was really close to being made on both sides of lacrosse in college in the NCAA. And Boston College just, man, they caught fire and sent the ladies back with their heads down to Evanston. But shout out to the Lady Wildcats and a great season, great 2 seasons, and they'll be back. They'll be back. That program is humming. It's absolutely humming right now. So Mark Zachary commits. Official visit season is beginning. Starting, I want to believe, starting this week. It's the last week of May and into June is when things really heat up. And then July, you have all types of official visits hopping on. But Jadon Blair, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. If Mike Mickens seals the deal with Jadon Blair, I don't know what else to say. We're starting to lose superlatives that we can mention when it comes to the recruiting and the coaching and development of the Notre Dame defensive backfield under the tutelage of one Mike Mickens. He's doing an absolutely incredible job. And I remember we did our most important coaches at the end of the season, and everybody was like, oh man, Al Golden. And I think I might have been the only person that said, yo, Mike Mickens is at the top for me. If we're going to include recruiting, coaching, and development, and we know Al Golden is the wizard for the Notre Dame defense. But like I said, when you're including recruiting, development, and everything else in its totality, it's hard to find a better coach on that staff than what Mike Mickens has been able to accomplish. It just really is. I'm just going to be flat out honest, ladies and gentlemen. It's really difficult. Maybe, nah. Well, offensively, maybe Dylan McCullough. I really want people to really truly appreciate not only what men's lacrosse did, but what we're seeing with Mike Mickens in coaching, development, and recruiting is absolutely fantastic. So there was a quarterback camp. Great former quarterbacks, David Rivers. I'm thinking Notre Dame basketball. Phillip Rivers and other former NFL quarterbacks and current NFL quarterbacks. They were there at the camp. Deuce Knight was there. Riley Leonard was there. And in the midst of all of that, Riley Leonard, of course, who missed the spring, and Left has been on top of this, saying, look, it's going to be a challenge for Riley Leonard, and he needs to make sure that he gets things together and gets guys together to catch up and get continuity. And lo and behold, after that camp, Notre Dame wide receivers, along with Deuce Knight and CJ Carr, quarterback CJ Carr, somehow made their way to the hometown of Riley Leonard. And then this popped up on social media. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what's up. Riley Leonard, wide receivers, Deion Colzie, Chris Mitchell, Jaden Harrison, Jaden Thomas, CJ Carr. But then I want to point your attention to the far right, ladies and gentlemen. All the way to the right in that picture is one Deuce Knight, the face of your 2025 recruiting class, wearing a Notre Dame football t-shirt, locked in with the current players, not with his recruiting class, but locked in with the recruiting, with the current players on the roster. Ladies and gentlemen, if this does not give you even more confidence that Deuce Knight is a young man of his word, when he says he is locked in, I don't care what the rumors are. I don't care what the reports are. If this picture does not make you feel good about where Notre Dame stands with the recruitment of Deuce Knight, I don't know what else is going to make you feel better. He doesn't have to be there. He doesn't have to. He sticks out like a sore thumb. He's not on the roster. What is he doing there? He must have been pretty impressive at that camp. That's all I'll say. Riley Leonard must have been like, hey, CJ, I know we're good. I've never seen anything like this kid here. I think we need to invite him down to the meet where we're going to link up with the wide receivers and catch up with them and throw some balls and run around and get some continuity and get some timing down. Yeah, we need to bring this kid. Lock him in. Ladies and gentlemen, this is amazing to see. Now, I know Left, the next time he's on the show, he wants to talk about this picture because he just wants to be petty. He just wants to be petty. You know, first time he saw the picture, he was like, where's Stephen Kenny at? And I'm like, Left, man, you're being petty. Come on, man. They were at camp. Those guys weren't at the camp. Steve said he was going back to New Jersey, after the blue and gold game. Kenny's probably down in Tennessee with his family. The Chicago kids, like Cam Williams, he's up here. He posted a picture from the golf course. He's enjoying his time off. That's what players do. They get away. But CJ Carr, Riley Leonard, Deuce Knight, the wide receivers in Notre Dame, spending some time working with each other, getting to know each other. It's good vibes. I feel really good about this. Riley Leonard is the guy. CJ Carr is a guy. And you best believe that monster to the far right that's towering over everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to look at Riley Leonard, look at CJ Carr in the middle of that picture, and then look at Deuce Knight. Once again, look at your two quarterbacks on the current roster, and then look at the dude to the far right that is to come. That's a monster, ladies and gentlemen. That is a monster that's headed to South Bend. He's going to be in your quarterback room. Stop falling for the rumors. Stop falling for all of that other stuff that's making you nervous about the recruiting of Deuce Knight. The young man says he's locked in. Marcus Freeman and the staff are doing everything they need to do to make him comfortable and make him feel like Notre Dame is the place to be for him. And the current roster knows we need to get this guy to continue the trend. So it's fabulous to see this picture and what's happening in Notre Dame football, ladies and gentlemen. All right, chat, let me know. LL question of the day before we get out of here today. Check me out in the recruiting hour with Ryan Roberts coming up at 1 o'clock Eastern. 1 o'clock Eastern, I'll be getting in with the recruiting hour. Cam McDaniel is going to join us. I want to let you guys know, I myself have taken time and had to take time. I have been pushing the envelope. Of course, I lost my dad, who was a fantastic man of God and a pastor here in Chicago. By that happening, give me a second, guys. My nose is running. Just give me 1 second. And we're back. Sorry about that. So I lost my dad in February, and it's been a challenge, not just emotionally, but having to really step up, assume the mantle for Chicagoland Christian Center in so many different ways, handle business of the family, not only being head of my family, my wife and my daughter, but becoming the head of the family as well. It's really been a lot. And I just want to encourage, because I love to use my life to encourage people, even in the midst of us talking Notre Dame and football. Even the bravest of warriors, if you search history in the history books, even the bravest of warriors were graced with a time of cleansing before they received their next assignment. And so I took the last week or so to kind of cleanse from everything that I have been doing, right? It's always good to fight the good fight of faith and to be strong and be of good courage and good cheer. But you also have to be balanced, and you have to make sure that you take time for cleansing and for purging, whether that's therapy or whether that's just going and spending some time, health and wellness and meditation, and just dealing with yourself and collecting your thoughts and refreshing yourself. And I took time last week to do that, and it was really unexpected. It was last minute, and I had to share with Left and some other people, like, yo, I need to do this. I have to do this. in order for myself to come back and to complete the assignments that are before me. So I thank all of you for your prayers, because I'm praying for you guys each and every day as well. And I encourage you. You know, the Word of God tells us through sanctification that we are to be made whole and to experience being holy. And that's holy with the W at the beginning, not the H, which means spirit, soul, and body. That is part of the process. And so I hope everyone is doing a good job and being active, and not only being um, full of faith in your walk, but make sure that you're self aware and taking care of yourself. Love each other, but most importantly, love God and love yourself as well. Can we do that? Please do that for me, and continue to pray for me as I pray for you. All right. But back to the LL question of the day. What is the switch for Notre Dame football? What is the switch for Notre Dame football this year? What's going to be that switch? I'm interested in seeing what you guys have to say in the chat. All right. We talked about, as Patrick Stevens said, you know, Maryland scores the first 2 goals in that match yesterday. And then all of a sudden, you know, he says, oh man, this might get interesting. And Notre Dame, he said he never doubted that Notre Dame would win, but yo, how in the world, you know, this might turn into something that Notre Dame might have to scratch out. They might have to tough this championship game, this championship match out. And then Notre Dame hit the switch, man. They hit the switches. They hit the hydraulics, and they started cruising like they were out on the West Coast. They hit them switches on them boys and knocked them out 15-5. And I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen. I think it could have been worse if Notre Dame really wanted it. I think it could have been worse if Notre Dame really wanted it to be worse. I think Notre Dame could have gotten the 20 goals yesterday. That's just between you and me. I think they could have gotten the 20 goals yesterday if they had kept their foot on the gas, if they had kept hitting the switches and bouncing on those dudes from College Park. Absolutely believe it wholeheartedly. But what's going to be the switch for Notre Dame? Is it going to be the new wide receivers in the passing game? Will it be the legs of Riley Leonard in big situations or clutch situations? Will it be the pass rush, the improved pass rush, the depth on the defensive line that we were teased with a little bit in the blue and gold game? Will it be the secondary, the lockdown secondary? Will it be the young linebackers as they grow throughout the season? Will they make the defining plays, the season defining plays on defense to seal games, to turn games around? What is going to be the switch? Oh, I can't forget. Thank you, chat. Will it be one of the coaches? Could it be Mike Denbrock coming back to Notre Dame in his new offense? Could it be Al Golden in year 3 with the players having even more information and feeling even more comfortable in his defense? Do they take it to another level? Will it be Al Golden in his defense? Will it be the maturation of Marcus Freeman, having his team better prepared to go on the road and face adversity and to overcome adversity? What do you think is going to be that switch that Notre Dame football can hit in 2024 to soar and have a great season into the playoffs and make a run into the playoffs? Let's see, Andrew Gilmore. Let's see what you have to say, Andrew. The switch is showing up on the road. They start in with tough road games. Those can make or break them. A playoff contender goes in and wins both. November definitely is going to raise the stakes going into the playoffs. Texas A&M, and then 4 weeks later, Florida State. I like that. I like the test right at the beginning of the season to show who you are. Then a few games to come out, become consistent in things, and, you know, ramp things up. Ramp it back up for the Louisville Cardinal as they come in to take a spanking because Notre Dame owes them from last year. That should be the first checklist game of the season. Like, yep, after Texas A&M, which of course is the first game. So that's, you're checking that the entire offseason. But once you get through that, focus, consistency. But that Louisville game, yes, big statement for multiple reasons. Multiple reasons. Let's get to a couple of super chats. Thank you to our guy Truman Theodore Dumel for the super chat. How special can Faison be for Notre Dame football? We've said this. I've said this. Notre Dame can have two of the best interior wide receivers, and Jordan Faison can be at his best if he is allowed to do what he does best, which is roam the middle of the field, take the top off the defense, run after the catch. That's who he is. He doesn't have to be the number one. That's something that I think that needs to be left to Chris Mitchell and Jaden Greathouse, and just let Jordan Faison be that X factor. Let him be what Ladd McConkey was 2 years ago for Georgia. Let him be that. Dangerous. Just dangerous. That's all he needs to be. And that is special within itself. He's already special. He showed he could be special last year, or he gave us a glimpse of how special he can be. And I expect him to be very good moving forward. Eric Spadell, thank you for the super chat. We need the receivers to hit the switch. I'm with you, Eric. I'm with you, bro. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Welcome back, my LL good brothers. Shout out to LL Nation and Go Irish, as always. Shout out to you, Eric. I agree. We're going to get to the rest of LL Nation and what they have to say, but wide receivers would definitely be at the top of my list. Definitely be at the top of my list. I got Michael Campbell. Thanks for joining us today. He says the Notre Dame offense is the switch. Top offensive coordination of coaching staff development and talent with depth. It's a total Freeman era overhaul. I agree. Mike Denbrock and what he's bringing, tempo, dependency of spreading the ball around, and also dependency of not leaving the running game. I don't want people to think that this is just about to be a departure of the run game. And we understand that the offensive line is young, yet talented. Could be some issues early on in the season, but we're not asking them to dominate because we have so much. See, this is the thing now. There's so much outside talent that you don't need as much time, and you shouldn't be dealing with 8 and 9 in the box with Riley Leonard and the talent on the outside. That's why I say Notre Dame fans need to relax about the young offensive line, because I don't think this offensive line is necessarily going to face the same defenses historically that Notre Dame offensive lines have faced. But that hinges on Riley Leonard being who we suspect he can be and expect him to be, and what these wide receivers can bring on the outside. If they can do their jobs, they'll make the job for the offensive line that much easier and give them time to grow into the monster of the offensive line I think they can be heading into November. And I think that was the offseason vision of Marcus Freeman. This is one of the main reasons he went back to the portal. Knowing that his offensive line was going to be young, he went and he got weapons. He went and he got weapons to alleviate the pressure that historically has always been on the Notre Dame offensive line. To dominate, to have to hold up against really good teams in order for Notre Dame to be successful offensively. Now, with the outside weapons and the depth of outside weapons and weapons in the backfield, now Notre Dame, schematically and talent-wise, has what it takes to keep defenses on their heels, to keep defenses from pinning their ears back and coming downhill and attacking the run game. And you add that to the wisdom of Mike Denbrock and the rest of this offensive coaching staff, they might be able to do some things to allow to protect this offensive line as much as they can, but then allow them to go out and execute a game plan that's going to put up a lot of points until they're ready to be dominant. I got Ed 3. Thank you for joining us. If we're going to turn the corner, it has to start at quarterback with the wide receivers. Hey, that seems to be the trend with you guys today, the way you respond. Because the defense has already been there, the running game is already there. Special teams has been good. Special teams is going to need to be better, in my opinion, and definitely be better from what we saw in the punting game during the blue and gold game and what we saw in spring. They go out, they get one of the most efficient and consistent kickers in the portal. And what does he do in the blue and gold game? He misses a field goal early in that game. So, yes, special teams bears watching, and special teams is always important in big games. We all know that. I got Jason Smith. Thank you for tapping in with us, brother. Hope everything's going well with you and the family. I think the switch is going to be a more prevalent player-led accountability and leadership culture that has them locked in every game and to not have the letdown games. You know what? That's a great point of view. Really didn't even think about leadership and accountability. I have to be honest. But that is very important, and it goes to the point that we were talking about earlier, right? When we talked about Marcus Freeman being part of that switch and his maturity. And I think that flows downhill, right? As he matures as a head coach, it only allows the players to have a better culture, to have that type of leadership and accountability, Jason. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm looking forward to seeing who the captains will be. Will it be a mix of youngsters along with the veterans? Will it be led by mostly veterans? I'm looking forward to see how that plays out going into the fall. That should be very important. Let's get a couple of more. Beef Eater says bagpipes are the switch, which ND football players should learn the bagpipes to lead the team. And once again, that's one of the things with ND men's lacrosse. Someone has to play the bagpipe and learn how to play the bagpipe, which I think is absolutely amazing that an actual player learns that craft and leads the team out into the field. That's absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Will the Notre Dame football team ever invoke the playing of the fight song as much as the Notre Dame men's lacrosse team in a season? That's a good question. I don't think they will, especially as good as Notre Dame's men's lacrosse is now. But it's a good question. Coffees for closers. Attitude is everything, mayhem and destruction on D, finesse and execution on O, throttle teams. I'm all with that. Patrick Duffy, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate you. He said the biggest switch click for Notre Dame would be to have Riley Leonard drive the team into the end zone in the first possession against Texas A&M. Leadership on the field. That's right. I'm with you, Patrick. Get off to a great start. That's right. Step on their necks and don't come off. Keep the party going. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm right there with you. Lucky Lefty podcast. So other than that, I want you guys to tap in. I'm going to be over. I think we're going to have another show tonight. Malik's going to be back. We're going to have another show tonight. Thank you to our guy, Patrick Stevens, for tapping in today to talk about men's lacrosse. Thank you to everyone that joined today to talk about what's going on with the quarterbacks, connecting with the wide receivers. Also, Mark Zachary committing, Mike Mickens and what he's doing on the recruiting trail. And then the one key to the almost perfect recruiting class in the secondary that Mike Mickens is putting together. Jadon Blair's left. He's still on the board. We're going to talk about him a little more over on the Recruiting Hour Irish Breakdown with myself and Ryan Roberts coming up shortly. It's going to be a great show. We're going to talk about official visits coming up. We're going to talk about Junior Day coming up, the Irish Invasion. and a few other things to get you ready for official visit season starting in a couple of days. Hey guys, thank you for joining me this morning, man. We wanted to celebrate Notre Dame men's lacrosse. I sounded like an Australian right there. Lacrosse, and cover a few things. Malik will be back with us this evening for another edition of the Lucky Lefty podcast. Man, go subscribe on YouTube, Lucky Lefty Podcast. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. We appreciate you guys. We'll be locked back in tonight, but we'll get more in depth on quarterback play, what to look for, and how Mike Denbrock is going to use the run game or the passing game to set up the run game. Left is going to break it down for you. We'll see you tonight right here, Lucky Lefty Podcast. Have a great day, but most of all, make sure that you continue to spin it different. See you tonight, and I'll see you in a little bit over at the Recruiting Hour.